Hi there, welcome to 10 Street's 2 minute tastings. Slightly different one this week. We're actually going to be talking to one of our producers, a nice lady called Collette from the Henners Vineyard. Can you get that, Matt?
Yeah.
So we've got three. We've got the rosé, we've got the vintage, and we've got the brut that we stock from the Henners Vineyard, £33 each. And we've also got a very nice gift box for Christmas or for any other occasions that a specialty is. So without further ado, I'm going to go to the interview. I'm going to talk to Collette from Henners. Hi there, and welcome to 10 Street's Wine. A bit of a different tasting this week. I've got my good colleague Mike with us, Mike Williams. Hi, Mike.
Hello, hi.
And I've got Collette from the Henners Vineyard in East Sussex. Hi, Collette.
Hello.
Hi. And over the past couple of weeks, we've taken delivery of some lovely bottles of English sparkling wine. So Henners do a brut, they do a vintage, and they do a rosé. So we're going to have a chat to Collette about that. But first of all, Collette, I'd just be really interested to know how did you get into winemaking, and what's your journey as a winemaker?
Well, I'll give you the abridged version. I'm actually a second career person. I've retrained, and I used to work in marketing and PR back in London up until 2010. And I'd been looking for an excuse to get out of marketing. I don't have the diplomacy for PR, as it turns out. And so I was looking for an excuse, and I'd been traveling. I spent 3 months working at a cellar door in New Zealand, and I fell in love with wine and the wine industry. And I realized that kind of vineyards and drinking wine, unsurprisingly, was my happy place. But I knew that when I retrained, I wanted to do something hands-on, literally and metaphorically. I'd done a lot of talking about other people's products, and I knew that it was time I wanted to do something myself. And so wine production kind of came together, really. I went back to the English university in Sussex called Plumpton College, and I trained as a winemaker. I did a degree in viticulture and enology in 2011, and I graduated and have been kind of trying to learn my craft on the ground ever since.
Gosh, okay, that's so interesting. So I didn't realise you could do degrees in that. Maybe I'll retrain as well. And how did you come to Henners? What was the journey to the vineyard?
Yeah, so after graduating, I've spent some summers working at vineyards in California and in South Africa, and I was assistant winemaker at another Sussex vineyard. And then as part of the Boutonneau purchase of Henners after 2017, they were looking to expand the team and the winery, and they were looking for somebody that would come in and fit. And so I joined the Henners team in January 2018. And the wider Boutonneau team, and we've kind of been foot on the gas ever since.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the vineyard itself, how long has that been going?
The Henners itself was established in 2007. Right. We're in a little village in East Sussex called Hurstmonceux. We're near the battle where the Battle of Hastings took place, kind of 5 kilometres inland from the coast. So we're right near the English Channel. And we were planted with Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier in 2007. So for sparkling was the main purpose.
Okay. Where did the grapes come from? Did you source them specially, or?
The vines come from a nursery in France.
Right. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
What's your kind of raison d'etre at Henners? What are your kind of wine beliefs?
Well, I want to make wine. It sounds a cliche, but I want to make wine that people want to enjoy drinking. I think for all sorts of really good reasons, wine is treated with veneration, and it's delicious. But not every wine kind of needs a hushed sermon and I think that I just want to drink wine. I want to make wine that we enjoy drinking, and it's pleasure and it's fun and it's accessible and approachable, and it screams quality, but it doesn't have to cost the earth. So that's kind of, I would say, our overriding driving principles, really.
Okay. And in terms of the 3 bottles that we've got stocked at 10 Street are obviously all sparkling. Mike might have a better question than me here. What methods do you use to make the sparkling? Is it traditional champagne method? Or?
Yes, so it's all traditional method. So bottle fermented with the second fermentation in the bottle, and that's largely because when English wine was coming of age over the last decade or so, we were looking to our nearest neighbours to see what they were doing well, and our nearest neighbours are the north of France and the Champagne houses, and that has kind of driven a lot of production in England. Both in terms of the varieties, but also the production methods. Also, because England is quite a cool climate, it's still quite cold. Acidity tends to be quite high, and these wines really benefit from longer aging, and you can really get that longer aging by second fermentation in the bottle, aging the wine on what's called its yeast lees. So you get development, complexity. It's called autolysis, which is where those biscuit bread brioche notes come from, and that softens the acidity and rounds the edges, and you get a more complex, rounded glass of wine because of that. And so the best method for producing that style of wine to kind of balance out that acidity is in my view, it's the traditional method.
Right. Okay.
Can I just jump in? I noted that you used the three grapes that are commonly used in champagne, and they're obviously fermented individually, and then you blend the at what stage, this is a trick question by the way, it's my interest as much as anything, at what stage do you blend the different wines together?
So we physically blend the different tanks together in probably February, March time, ahead of typical bottling is in May for sparkling. But the reality is the wines are kind of finishing alcoholic fermentation now. They're just coming to the end of malolactic fermentation, which is a process that softens the acidity. And we're tasting the tanks on a weekly basis. So already we're getting an idea of how these different parcels that are in tanks and the different varieties are shaping up. Whether it's been a good year for Chardonnay or one of the Pinots, we're getting a sense of which blend it might ultimately end up in. And then come January, we'll start playing around with the actual trial blends. We'll try different tanks and different combinations, and then we physically pull the wines together in kind of March time.
Well, that's interesting. So the blend of the different wines, it's not set every year. It's not always the same percentage of Chardonnay. As I see, okay, so there's a different. I see. I didn't understand that. I didn't know whether you stuck to a very strict blending formula.
No, we have a kind of guiding principle, I suppose. So, for example, we'll talk about the Brut. We know that the Brut is a combination of the three classic varieties, and we know partly from a profile and a taste perspective, but pragmatically, partly because we know how much Chardonnay we've got planted. So we know that the Brut blend is kind of 40-ish% of the Brut blend. Chardonnay is 40% of the Brut blend. Yeah. Pinot Noir will be somewhere around 35%. And Meunier is somewhere around 25%, but we'll play around with that. The vintage we know from experience now, and because we want it to be longer aging, that's 70% Chardonnay, 30% Pinot Noir, and there's no Meunier in that. But they're kind of guiding principles that you respond to the season, you respond to how the tanks are tasting, whether you're going to introduce barrels into the blend or reserve wines. And you play around with it and you do respond. If you try and make it to a kind of recipe, it doesn't work. And it's not much fun anyway. Yeah. You have your guiding principles, but you respond to how the wine's tasting.
So it's more of an art than a science almost.
Yeah, and do you know what? I think that's why wine captures people, because it is art and science. And if you're a really rigorous scientific person and it has to fit a certain way every time, wine doesn't do that.
Yeah.
So you do have to be able to respond. And when we're pulling these blends together, it's a little bit like sometimes putting together an outfit. You try different combinations of things, and sometimes it can be over the top, or sometimes it can be a little bit understated. And then when you get the right combination, it all kind of comes together, and it's greater than the sum of its individual parts. And that's where the art comes into it.
Yeah.
But you can't just ignore the science, or the wines will go a bit rogue and faulty. So it's like, it has to be kind of a combination of the two.
Okay.
Interesting. One aspect of this type of wine as well that interests me, Collette, I don't know why it's always struck me, but do you add dosage? Is it, what do they call it? Is it liqueur d'expedition or something like that? Do you go through that process as well at the end for a slight sweetness to it?
We do, but actually, so it does add a bit of sweetness to the dosage. We don't have any zero dosage wines.
Right.
And there's a few things that dosage brings. It does bring sweetness, but actually, if it's done in the right amount, you shouldn't taste sweetness.
Yeah,
Balance out the acidity. It can lift the fruit. It can add a bit of body. But beyond that, we can also play around with some reserve wines.
Right.
So we can, the dosage is quite an incredible fine. It's like the cherry on top of the fine production process.
Yeah.
Just again, you're talking about milliliters that are added in this dosage, and a milliliter or two of some reserve wine along with the sugar can change the direction of the wine. It can add some depth and complexity to a youthful wine, or it can kind of, if you add a more youthful wine in the dosage to an older wine, it can lift and revitalize the wine. So there's all sorts of, the champenoise, for example, guard their liquor secrets very, very carefully.
Yes, yeah.
Different ways that you can play with it, and it's something that we're continuing to develop and explore.
Interesting, yeah. I've always thought it's always a little bit of magic at the end that I've never really fully understood. So yeah,
it
interesting.
is magic, and we don't tell anybody what goes in it.
Good stuff. Excellent.
Do you have any more questions about the wine, Mike, or should we move on to the tasting?
No, carry on, please. Yeah.
So if we can do a little tasting together, Collette, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So we've got the Brut that we're stocking, Intense Streets wine, and I've got a little glass poured, just let it breathe a little bit. So could you take us through it? And
yeah, absolutely. I also have a glass here.
okay.
So one of the things, it gets a bit geeky now, but one of the reasons that I'm in, for example, a more traditional white wine glass rather than the flute, it's one of the kind of latest things that people are exploring and looking at. And traditionally, we always like tasting them in flutes. But the thing is that the flute is quite narrow, and it kind of directs the aromas up to your senses. When a slightly wider glass like this one, it allows those aromas to open up a little bit more, so you get a little bit more from the glass.
Right.
So it's always fun to experiment a little bit with these wines in different glasses to see what aromas you pick up. But the Brut is it's our classic blend. So it's the 3 varieties: Chardonnay 40% ish, Pinot Noir 35%, and Pinot Meunier 25%.
Okay.
And those 3 varieties work in harmony together. So Chardonnay typically brings a citrus orchard fruit backbone to the wine, and it's the skeleton of the blend. And then the Pinot Noir brings structure and length and red fruit to it. And Pinot Meunier typically is a little bit lower in acidity, and it softens up the blend. It often brings some slightly floral notes, a bit more wild strawberry to the blend. And those 3 varieties work together in harmony to create a kind of rounded package that will be approachable while relatively young, but also have the Chardonnay backbone that allows the wine to stay fresh as it ages. We then allow this wine to have 3 years aging, so that's where you start to get some of those more kind of complex, slightly more toasty, creamy notes come through from that aging. And then what you really want on the palate is this lively, zesty lemon pith, baked apple, those kind of characteristics.
That's terrific, that.
It's tasting really fab at the moment.
Dry, isn't it?
It's salivating and juicy, and it makes your mouth water, but in all the good ways. And you want this to be crisp and refreshing, and it wants to have that balance of sweetness that softens the acidity, but it shouldn't be sugary. It shouldn't be coating your mouth. It should be fresh. It should have depth, and you should continue to be able to taste it once you've swallowed. And you definitely can. It's got a good body. It's got a nice richness to it. And for me, it's a real crowd pleaser. Oh, and actually, it won gold at the IWC this week. So it is all.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Gold star wine.
Oh, good.
Congratulations. Yeah.
And what would you pair that with food-wise?
So it's a really good all-rounder.
Yeah.
So it would go really well with, you know, your canapes and things like cashew nuts and salts and salted nuts, that sort of thing. But also because the Chardonnay content in these wines work really well with like soft cheeses. Nothing too strong, but probably like a sheep's milk soft cheese. Because what happens is that the acidity in these wines cut through the fat of the cheese. The shape of the bubble structurally complements the smoothness of the cheese, and they can work really well between that kind of acidity, sweetness, and saltiness of the cheese. So this one would go really well with something like that.
Right. Okay. It's lovely. It's a lovely taste. A lovely taste.
Yeah.
So, and can people come and visit you at Henners? Do you do any tours or anything like that? Or
Not at the moment, but there are big plans for the future. So it's a question of watch this space.
okay, and you're in East Sussex, of course.
Yes, yeah, we're in East Sussex.
Lovely. Well, there you go. That's the Henners Brut, which we have on our website and also at the 10 Streets wine bar as well, if you want to come down and taste a bit of that. So thank you for your time today, Collette, and lovely wine.
You're very welcome. Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Collette.